But there's something about getting a 911, a rear-wheel drive, not picking a rear-wheel drive one, just set. When you get that, you've played with the weight. You've used that throttle sensitivity and the weird positioning of the engine. You just get it sat back on its arse, and then you just feed the power in, throw more gas at it.
Hi everyone, I'm so excited today. Thank you to Collecting Cars for this opportunity. Normally we would have loved to host our guest here at Werks Reunion, Monterey. Unfortunately, that can't happen, and I think you all know why. Travel is pretty difficult these days. But the next best thing, what we've done is we went out to our members and asked them if they would like to have questions answered by Chris Harris. Obviously, you've probably seen him in Top Gear, Drive. Chris Harris drives, big fan. Welcome to PCA and welcome to Werks Reunion Monterey, Chris.
Thank you, guys. Sorry I can't be there. For an English person to be offered California sunshine and turn it down is just shows you that we're in the middle of a global pandemic still, because I'd be over there like a rat down a drain pipe if I could.
Well, we certainly are looking forward to hosting you when the time comes, and let's just jump right into it. We had a lot of questions that were submitted by PCA members. Some of them wanted you to actually come by and figure out the electronics in their car. Some of them wanted to know what your favorite meal was. But we're gonna be focusing on Porsche and talking about what I think is one of your favorite marques, obviously one of our favorite marques. But I'm gonna go back in time a little bit because I was curious. I've seen you, all the things that you've done with cars, and where did that all come about? Who was your automotive hero growing up?
Oh, it's twofold, really. I don't think if I had an individual that inspired me and enabled me, it was my mother. She passed away not long ago, but she was a autocross and rally driver in the late 1950s. So I was in that perverse position, being a young'un in the sort of early to mid 80s. And it was my mother that could drive cars. And whenever I could go for a drive in my father's car with my mother driving, I knew it was going to end up being great. And I had it in the blood. So many people, I'm sure, as a member of your club, just had this thing in their blood, that cars interested them, cars something they wanted to talk about. And the other thing that leads into that is that it was motoring media. And that's why I feel that people that are growing up around cars now have such a wonderful, broad, colourful canvas on which to enjoy this subject. Because when I was younger, it was car magazines. There was no internet. You couldn't get really any videos about cars. Top Gear was the only TV show in the UK that was about cars, but it was quite non-specialist and didn't have much time to get into subjects. So I was brought up on a diet of the great British car magazines, Autocar, Car, Performance Car, stuff like that. And I suppose it was the writers in those magazines that are still my heroes. You know, I get to meet them on launches. Some of them are much older guys now, but they're still the people that shaped my passion for cars.
Absolutely. I too love going to the grocery store with my parents so that I could go to the magazine section. And when they spent their hour doing what they needed to do, I just flipped through and read all of my favorite articles. Most of my reading was in supermarkets growing up. Speaking of being in the blood, I believe you have 3 kids. Are you seeing this gene being passed on to one of them or a few of them?
Interesting. Yes, they don't have it like I had it. I'd say mine was more of a medical condition, but I would say yes, I see it. But I'm acutely aware of the fact that you don't want to foist your own passions on your offspring. They have to find their own passions, because unless they find their own passions, they won't be authentic. There's no point in them sharing my passion if it's not theirs. So I don't want to live vicariously through them. I want them to find their own thing. But yes, of course, they love some of the cars that I get to drive. And there's cars to drive around in fields and crash. And there are motorcycles as well. So, yeah, I hate to say it, they get a bit of access to motorized stuff.
Well, that's awesome. And I'm the same way. Like my kids, I have 3 kids as well. And they're around it all the time. I try not to force feed it to them. Back in the day, my father was heavily into boating. And probably if you ask me today, the last thing I want is a boat. No offense to all of you that love boats, but I want, as you said, the kids to naturally be attracted to it and find their own way and what they love in the automotive scene.
Absolutely. You know, we tend to be reactions to our parents. If your parents were spenders, you're probably a saver. If your parents love Ferrari, you've probably got a 911 on your drive.
Yeah. So you've been quoted, I remember hearing you saying that Porsche makes the best internal combustion engine on the planet. So you're a fan. That's clearly obvious. Can you share with us your first Porsche experience?
Oh wow. So yes, I'm an unashamed Porsche fan, to the point where I've been accused of being bought by the company, of being biased, of being not objective. But that's just nonsense. I just love the cars. Whenever I've had the money to buy a Porsche, I've bought a Porsche. I still own Porsches because they fit with what I want from a motor car that can be both usable and durable, but also switch something on me when I want to feel special. And that's the Porsche. The Porsche Weg, the Porsche way, is this thing that is so dependable and yet has the specialness about it because it's mechanically a bit different. So I'll give you a couple of Porsche memories. When I was very, very young, the first Porsche I went in, curiously, was a 928, a really, really early 928, one of the first ones into the UK. It would have been like 1980. A friend of mine's father had one. You had to be quite wealthy to have one then. And we were going to school in it, and he attempted to drive through a ford. Do you have fords? It's basically a road that has water that goes across it, a stream. It's a short story. It didn't make it through the ford. It flooded. And I think he hydraulic the engine as well. He didn't really mind too much. I think his chauffeur collected us in something else afterwards. But that was the first Porsche I went in, and it was for about 10 minutes until it flooded. And then I had limited access to cars like that, or Porsches, until I was about 15, 16. And one of my friends had an old guy lived opposite, had a 964. And I remember I had a burgeoning passion for Porsche, but I'd never really I hadn't been in a 911. I knocked on his door. Can you imagine doing that in this day and age? A 16-year-old boy knocking on a 45-year-old bloke's door and saying, "Can I go in your car?" I'm sure there's probably a law against that, or a register you'd end up on. But I wanted to go in this car. It mattered to me, and unless you asked back then, you didn't get. And he took me out in this car, and he told me about why he liked it. He didn't drive it especially well, but I was captivated by the noise, by the sense of this thing being so much more solid feeling than any other vehicle I'd been in. Even though my father had BMWs, there was a sense of this thing being a tank. And I loved it. I loved it. So I promised myself that when I could, I would. And about 8 months into my first job as a motoring journalist, I did something utterly reckless. I had a Lotus Elise, which I'd saved up for on board. I sold that. I took out a loan, and I bought a G Series 88 Club Sport. Nice. Now, you did get those cars, I know, but they're quite different in Europe. It was quite a special car. It was 231 horsepower in a G Series, but hollow valve stems. It revved a bit higher. The whole car was light. And people know now that to drive them, even though the spec looks very similar and they get sniffed at as being not a 2.7 RS, they are actually better to drive than 2.7 RS. They're great cars. So that was the first Porsche I owned. You could argue it's been downhill ever since. No, it hasn't. I've had some other great ones, but that was a truly great car. And I did 45,000 miles in it over 4 years. Went to the Nürburgring 6 times in that car. And I just loved it. And it confirmed everything I suspected about owning a 911. It was everything I could have hoped for, and I adored it.
So at what point growing up did you have the thought of, one, automotive journalist, and when you wanted to dabble in racing, professional racing?
Okay, so I wasn't very good at anything, really. I was a bit of a layabout. And because I wasn't academic, and I sort of sauntered through school, and I went to a polytechnic, which is kind of a second-rate university in the UK. And during my holidays there, in holidays I used to drink less, because during term time, obviously, that was when you drank and played sport. Didn't do anything academic at all. I went and did some more. I wanted to do some work experience at a car magazine, because I thought all I'd do is read car magazines, and everyone, my parents and people, were saying you have to do something with your life. So I went to some work experience at Autocar, and it was just magical. I got to meet these people I read. To finally meet Steve Sutcliffe and Steve Cropley and Colin Goodwin. These were the names that they were like my friends in my head, because I'd read them for years, but I'd never met them. And the moment I got there, I knew that I had to work there. But it took 3-4 years to persuade them to give me a job, because, to quote the then editor, Patrick Fuller, who I owe many things to, He said, we simply can't give you a job because we can never have you represent All's Car magazine because you're a shambles.
Well, look at you today.
I'm still a shambles, but you know what? They showed some faith in me, and I just loved it. They were the happiest days of my working life. I got to meet the people. I got to go and do the testing. I got to do the photography. I got to meet people that would teach me how to drive. I never wanted to be a racing driver. I'm not a racing driver. I'm very clear on that. I'm not a racing driver. I'm someone that gets to race cars to a level I never thought I would. But I learned quite a bit about car control from people like Steve Sutcliffe. And then eventually, as many journalists in the US will now confirm, you get given access to racing because you can write about it and publicize. And racing is ultimately a marketing activity. So if you've got an outlet to put a story or a video, you'll get invited to race stuff. And then I got invited to race stuff, and that sort of snowballed a bit. And I've done a few years of GT racing. So all of it, I pinch myself because it's not supposed to be me. I don't have the talents to any of that. I just loved it, and I just sort of rode the wave. And I sit back sometimes and think, well, how did that all happen? And I never got to race a Porsche in Blancpain in GT racing, which I slightly regret because the very generous guys that always let me race their cars always bought Bentleys, McLarens, and Aston Martins, and never a GT3. But I used to turn up for the first season test at Monza always, and basically walk past all the Porsche drivers and go, I wish I was driving your car.
Well, like you, I feel very fortunate to be in the automotive world as a career, being around Porsche folk. You spoke a little bit about learning your skill, and I think nothing's more synonymous with you than drifting a car, taking it sideways, and showing how exciting it is. So our members wanted to know, when was the first time you did that, and what was the first Porsche you did that in?
Bedford Autodrome in my 88 Club Sport. And I remember this sense of feeling the grip down the side of the car, and then I at that point I wanted to put more power in to make the car power oversteer. And I think we just understeer. And someone said to me, someone clever, probably a sucker or a good one, said, just back off the throttle, just peel off the throttle. It feels counterintuitive. It feels like it's going to be dangerous. You're going to induce that kind of big oversteer moment that has kind of been the hindrance of all Porsches throughout time. But if you do it just enough, not too much, just peel off the throttle a couple of mil, you'll feel the weight move and then come back in the throttle and catch it. And it was a eureka moment, and it felt amazing. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I can do this. And then, of course, I probably spun 2 laps later because you get too confident. But the first time I did it for work was a really nice story, and it is a Porsche story. So the first GT3 to come to the UK was 99. It was the first week of July, 99, I remember vividly. It was a red car, SGO, whatever it was. It was a press car. I went to collect it. My bosses said, go to Germany and go to Werks Reunion and collect the first GT3 and bring it back to the UK and road test it. I mean, I'm thinking, they're going to pay me to do this? I would pay all my money in my bank account to do this. I brought the car back. I maxed it on the Autobahn. I did all the things that you would do. If you had done it, you'd have done the same. All of you watching this, you'd have done the same.
Absolutely.
And I got it back to the UK, and I slid it around on some test track, and I wrecked the rear tyres, and there weren't any M0 rated tyres in the UK, which caused all sorts of problems. But I've got the photographs on my desk of the car, and it all sort of started there for me. And ever since then, I love sliding cars around, but there's something about getting a 911, a rear-wheel drive, not picking a rear-wheel drive one, just set. When you get that, you've played with the weight. You've used that throttle sensitivity and the weird positioning of the engine. You just get it sat back on its arse, and then you just feed the power in, throw more gas at it, and it just becomes balletic. And it's just a difficult thing to describe, but there's lots of very trite comparisons between driving cars and other activities, sometimes involved in the bedroom. And I have to say that for me, little beats the 911 slide.
Well, it's definitely a choreography, right? And the more you do it, the balance, and when you get it just right, it's so incredibly satisfying. So I totally get it. You mentioned the 911 a lot, and you drive a lot of 911s, and I think everybody knows you're a huge 911 fan. Let's kind of look forward. What are your thoughts on the future of the 911, the sports car, in terms of electrification and possibly synthetic fuels?
Wow, big subjects. So right now, I think we're living in a dangerously politicized world where politicians are deciding what the future of the motor car should be. And scientists are in the background going, well, what about us? We actually know what the solutions might be, but sadly, governments are deciding what we can and can't do. So I see, and I'm apolitical, but I think that there are clever solutions out there. And what's coming to us now is an electric future. Certainly in Europe, it's a bit less for you guys, but in Europe, we're being told it's all electric. You're going to be driving electric cars. That's just not, I don't see it as a realistic solution. I really don't. At the moment, I do see a completely electric 911 because I think if Porsche wants to continue selling a car called a 911 in Europe, it'll have to be electric. Probably in 5 years' time, there'll have to be a fully electric one, at the very least, a hybridized one that's mostly electric. I don't know if I'm excited about that or disappointed. What I can tell you is it's not a car I want to buy. So I think we're in a lovely era right now where rather than worrying about the future, maybe we should enjoy the now. I was talking about this with someone today. I've got an Alfa Romeo GTAM outside my place at the moment, a crazy looking thing with the wide arches and loads of power. And actually, I'm beyond the point now where I want to give an opinion on these cars. I don't want to say they're good or bad. I just think they're wonderful. They're there. We should celebrate them whilst they're there. Any car maker that's willing to give us something fairly crazy, I want to thank them for it. I want to hug them for it because I don't think they're going to be around that long. So let's enjoy them now. Let's enjoy the fact that for now, the fast 911s are the best cars that we'll probably ever see to drive. They're just sensational motor cars. Let's enjoy the back catalogue because those that have bought them and own them can enjoy them. I will talk on synthetic fuels. I think synthetic fuels are a brilliant idea. They're really exciting, the idea that you can put that in your car and use it. However, there has to be a note of caution around will local authorities still allow you to drive such vehicles into towns? If you can't drive them anywhere, they do become a bit like a chocolate fire guard. But I want to remain optimistic. I like to think that people will work out that actually the global impact of people that want to drive a few miles in a special old car a year, it's so insignificant matched against the other challenges we face as a species that hopefully common sense will prevail.
Well, that's a great attitude, and I agree with you. I think the cars that are available, not only from Porsche, but just automakers around the world, there are some exciting cars right now that we should just enjoy. And I get the question of, what do you think about the electric vehicles and this, that, and the others? People tend to have a very negative perspective on, sort of run-of-the-mill electric cars. But I know that you had probably the biggest smile in your face when you drove the Taycan Turbo, and that there is fun, or there can be fun, in the electric world if it's designed to be that way.
I do. I think all of these technologies and the emotional response they engender in us are emerging so fast that we've not had time to fully understand the relationship between driver and electric car, and it's unsophisticated at the moment, and I'll specify why. At the moment, the electric car has one trick, and that's to go really fast, it's to accelerate really fast. So all car makers are doing to demonstrate how sexy their electric cars are is to make them go faster and faster. And we're only a few years in, and we've already reached the end point. The 2,000 horsepower Rimac is so fast, I think your kidney comes out of your eye socket if you accelerate. So it's pointlessly fast already. So the car makers have been lured into this space where it has to be faster and faster, but they've got nowhere to go. Someone clever, because engineers and scientists are clever people, someone clever will go, let's alter the framework. Let's change the discussion. Let's make an electric car that's emotional. Let's make it fun. Let's give it gears. Let's make it make a fun noise. Let's take grip out of the car. Let's do something else. And it will happen. Someone clever will do it, and then everyone else will go, oh, why did we have 2,500 horsepower? That was pretty pointless. So, and what will precipitate that change? I don't know, but I know that it will happen.
Well, I think in a way for us Porsche diehards, it's sort of history repeats itself. If you look back into the 70s where muscle cars were doing quarter mile times in, 10, 11, 12 seconds, and the Porsche had a little six-cylinder in the back with, a little bit over 200 horsepower. Like Porsche got that, going down the road is fun. There's like you said, a certain point, like how fast do you need to go 0 to 60? But then the fun is after that, when you come to that first bend and you apply the brakes and how you get around the corners, and then you do that repeatedly, and that's what's fun. And I think that's where Porsche can maybe take its history and shine and make the electric vehicle for the enthusiasts.
Yeah, I agree. And of course, everything's part of a strategy. Porsche as a company is a long way ahead of us. There's a reason why singular, tends to launch stuff that makes you go, well, that's clever. But they've been thinking about that for 5 to 7 years. Mm-hmm. So they're clever people, and they'll be thinking about that thing. There's something that's box to shape, box to size there, I would have thought. I don't know this. I'm totally speculating. It's got an electric powertrain in it. It's probably got a lever between the seats. It might even have 3 pedals. God knows what they do. But they understand, as a company, better than anyone, that if you don't sell something emotional with the product, then you might as well just be selling fridge freezers or any old white good. And emotion for the driver is about much more than just raw speed. So, yeah, I think the Taycan Turbo S is an extraordinary vehicle. But I do think, and I'll say this to the Porsche owners out there, I'm sure you're enjoying the car, I think it's too fast. The Turbo S is too fast. And now, in every other model range, I want the fast one. Okay? If you're going to have a Series 911, I want a Turbo S thing. So if I'm going to have a GT3, I want the one with the best engine, whatever else. But in the Taycan, I take a 4S. Because the Turbo S is absurd. It's so fast, you're out of sync with other traffic. Every time you accelerate, it's like, whoa, where did that come from? So, yeah, it almost answers the question: are these cars too fast? Answer: yes.
So does that mean your recent video with the GT3 and the 500 horsepower mark? You're saying that's enough?
It's not for me to say what's enough, because what's enough for me isn't enough for the next man or woman. Okay, I'm not the arbitration point for that. But I think I can make a strong argument to say that I don't need any more. And that if you give me more, I'm not sure I do anything very positive or productive with it.
Very fair.
And around a track, and I'm an older guy now, and there's going to be younger people that are better drivers than me and that can do other stuff that I can't do. I accept that. But if I'm saying that, then it must be true for a few people, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So we can't do an interview without talking about sort of today's world and the reason why you're not at Monterey with us due to the pandemic and such. But one of the things that I like, as you said, focusing on the now, is looking at how Porsches and cars in general have really been elevated in values. Like, do you think this pricing, I mean, with the sort of the spotlight being brought onto cars by folks like Collecting Cars and all these online auctions, at what point does it stop, or will it stop? What are your thoughts?
Everything stops, even clocks. So I'm not going to say that that it's not going to stop. I think what we're seeing is a very strange point in all of our lives. Life as we know it stopped, but people still had resources, and they also, most people of a certain age had very recently probably become comfortable with buying stuff online they wouldn't have bought even a year, 2 years previously, whether that was on Amazon or on eBay. But they suddenly found they probably had a transaction experience that made them think, oh, I can do that. I didn't realize I spent $1,000 on something that I hadn't actually seen physically, but it's arrived. I like the way it arrived. I like the way that it was done. I felt like I got a good deal. So buying behaviours have changed. The values of cars themselves, well, I can't explain it. No one can explain exactly why it is. I'm sure some socioeconomic professor could define it better than me, but I'll hazard a guess. I think you go into a pandemic, and the moment it goes, the moment you sit down for the first month, you sit with your loved ones, your partner, your family, whoever it is, and you panic and you think, my life might never be the same again. And what you do is you probably hunker down and you try and save some money. But as time goes on, you think that sense of abnormality probably makes you think, I need to do some things now that I hadn't done before, that I didn't have the minerals to do before, and I want to do them now. Maybe one of those is to buy a really nice car, or to buy a car that I fear might not be in production soon. It all then blends into this sense of how much longer can we do this? How much longer can we enjoy these cars? Put that in a melting pot, and I suddenly think a Carrera GT looks more appealing than a brand new Ferrari SF90. I think a GT3 of any sort, particularly with a manual gearbox, looks like a very, very appealing motor car because it's interactive, but it's fun. It's not going to cost you a fortune to service it, and you know you're going to be able to sell it on for some money afterwards because they're not making many of them going forwards. So, and this applies across the border. I just think motor cars, for once, I feel the market is being driven by some quite sensible reasons. I mean, in the last 10 years, the market at times has been driven by the wrong people buying the wrong cars for the wrong reasons and the wrong money. But I don't quite feel that's the same at the moment. I think there's a lot of people that are exercising a fantasy that they perhaps hadn't done before. And fair play to them. You know, I've got lots of cars that aren't bought. I've bought an M2 CS BMW. I've got a GT3 as well. I've bought two cars that do the same thing. I bought the BMW because it's a manual M car, just a short wheelbase with a rear-wheel drive chassis. I mean, that's not going to happen again. And I thought I need to have one. So I think a lot of people are saying that to themselves. And then you go on to collecting cars, you go on to an auction, and suddenly the process is quite easy, and there's a lack of fear. And also buying one of these cars that's in that sort of last 15, 20 years of age, they seem to be less worrisome, don't they? They're mechanically strong. Lots of people know about them. You're not buying them thinking, I need to put a new engine in it straight away. If I offered you a 100,000 mile 997 GT3 Gen 1 3.6 with 80,000 miles on the clock, you'd be thinking, oh, is the seat a bit worn out? You wouldn't be thinking, is the engine shot? And that provides people with a lot of reassurance. Sorry, long answer. I apologize.
Absolutely. No, perfect. And I think the online platforms have also made people a better buyer because there's opportunities to hear from people. You have to filter it out a little bit, but if you didn't know the nuances of a specific model, these platforms allow you to learn about the cars. Like you said, you talk about the 996 versus 997, 99. What are the nuances of why one would choose over the other? You can learn all this through these online auctions.
You can, and I wear the badge of pride because I was part of the start of it with Edward, and I think he's done an amazing job with his team. But I think with collecting cars, what's been very interesting is that there's a sense that the car market, buoyant, interesting, full of characters, has one thing about it which is a bit abnormal, and that is that the dealer sometimes, I think historically, has probably taken a bit too much out of the deal. You know, I walk into a car showroom. I want the car. I want the expertise of the person that's selling it. But I'm not sure I really need the really fancy building and the coffee machine. And when it dawns on you, we've all had that, haven't we? You know, you chop your car in, part exchange to get the next one, and they offer you $40,000, and you think, well, that's okay. Well, I would like a bit more. And then you see it up for $54,995 the next week. You think, hang on a minute, you've got to make a living. However, that's quite strong. There's no other industry I know that has such a big margin that comes in that place. I think the auctions are saying, why don't we turn over more volume and take less out of the deal? Let's not be quite so greedy with the customer and see what happens. And I think a lot of people are doing that. I mean, let's face it, almost all the growth in internet e-commerce is around people feeling they're getting better value, isn't it? That's the crux of it. When people are spending money, they want to feel that they're getting a better deal. And factor in, as you said, the sense that there's greater transparency, that you can learn about these things, that you become part of a community. Everything's linked together. So it's not, I'll be lying if I said it's for everyone. I know lots of people that still want to walk into a shiny car showroom and they want to be handed a really beautiful cup of Italian coffee by a very beautiful woman, and they want to then go and buy a car and feel $1 million. That will never change. And that is a lovely part of the motor industry. But I just think more people than we realise think there was a bit too much coming out of the deal to support some of those added extras.
Absolutely. So
and that's what Bring a Trailer was the one that did it first. But I remember the first BAT auctions, watching them. I remember with well-known journalist, and we also had the poem Mike Spinelli. I can remember bullying Spinelli into buying an XJR online. In fact, I think we pressed buy when he went to the toilet so that he had to buy it. But there's an excitement about watching an auction. It's a bit of theatre. I don't know. I really love it. I think it's a great process.
Absolutely. And it's like window shopping globally, right? And then you marks kind of and models come out that you haven't thought about in a while, or maybe you didn't even know, and then all of a sudden you're like, "Ooh, that's a possibility." And it's a great way to shop.
Everything's come up. We said about the marketplace. Everything is good news at the moment. Everything is good news at the moment, and it would be folly to assume that it will remain good news. The car market goes up, the car market goes down.
Yeah.
And if you, I say this consistently to everyone I talk to, if you buy a car and the only thing that's going to make you happy about owning that car is that it goes up in value, then you're a fool.
Absolutely agree 100%. And that's what we always say is do not buy a Porsche, do not buy a car because you're anticipating a certain return. Buy the car as though this is something you get to enjoy. If you happen to get a positive return at the time you sell, then that's just, that's just an added bonus, but never buy it for the value. Let's just change gears a little bit. As I said, we have a few questions from our members, if you don't mind answering. We know you're a huge fan of 911 GT3s, primarily water-cooled cars. From Gregory P, what would you consider the ultimate air-cooled Porsche?
Very simple answer. 1974 3-litre RS is that's probably my ultimate 911. I talk about GT3s more, but I can't really talk about the 3-litre RS without wanting one, so I tend to stay away from it because it reminds me of the fact I haven't got one. But it is just a sensational motor car. It's roadable. It's a bit awkward looking because it doesn't have the ducktail, and it's got that weird sort of precursor to the G Series front end. But to drive makes a 2.7 feel like a Pinto. It's just so good. And for me, it's everything. I would sell all of my cars to own one of those.
Wow, that was pretty amazing that you had that ready on your side to share with us.
And do you know what? I tell you what, I don't. You sent me the questions, but I don't look at them because otherwise you don't get real responses. I looked at the basic structure, but I don't. And none of these are rehearsed. But that
awesome.
car is in my head the whole time.
What was the scariest Porsche that you've ever driven?
3.6 turbo to the 964, whatever. It's got so many different names. 965. I'd call it a 964 3.6 turbo. So the bad boys car.
Yeah.
Was a pig, really. It's with the power kit. We had one with a power kit that I tested. Just big airbag wheels, so a lot of inertia on the steering. No TC. It was a wet road, and the car it would go through this awful ploughing understeer. The tyre technology wasn't good, and then, of course, once you got to the understeer, you had an armful of lock on it to get the positive steering on, and then the thing would oversteer. So either the wrong way, you had to navigate the wheel so fast to get this thing to stop it oversteering. And the diff was horrible, and it just that was
a handful.
The best looking 911 for me, probably ever. The bad boys car, the drive in the wet, pig.
Wow. Speaking of driving experience, can you share with us maybe your most memorable driving experience in North America?
Always been a few. So Pete Stout, who is obviously a legend in your communities, advised me once to drive from San Francisco to LA, and I did that in a Carrera. That was pretty spectacular. I loved doing massive slides in a Singer. No, not in a series production car, but in a Singer at Chuck Waller. That was the first time I ever drove one of those. I also randomly did a PCNA launch at Watkins Glen for the 997 Turbo Gen 1. And just traced the route of the old Grand Prix circuit, which goes out, a bit like Spa, goes out into the communities. That was really memorable as well, but for different reasons. So, yeah, and there's lots of ones that I can't talk about because they're clearly not legal.
And finally, what's in store for Chris Harris in 2022?
Oh, God. I will continue making the show I make called Top Gear, which is sadly, it's on BBC America, but they don't sort of generally release it in America, which is a great shame because I think you'd enjoy it. And I will be back on the YouTube and on the online. I can't say much more now, but I miss it. I want to do more because it feels like home. And I hope to get back and work with some of my old pals and produce some content because I love making big budget television, but it's slow moving and it's full of inertia. The product's beautiful, but I miss the slightly more smash and grab ramshackle days that allowed me to have fun and to build some great friendships and to really get through some product. I don't drive as much stuff as I'd want to at the moment. I want to buy a short wheelbase, if I can, 65 car and race it. So there's plans to do that because they are sensational to drive. I hope to take delivery of another Touring, maybe if I can, because mine's up on mine. We should have done. We aim to do 70,000 miles in my yellow car by the end of next year, and then I'll keep that forever. One of my children will probably get that. It won't be worth much at the end of that, will it? Can you imagine Chris Harris, 70,000 miles? And you put that on collecting cars, it would get about £5.
I think there's a niche for that car.
No, I'm just buoyant, and I want to enjoy. I don't want to sound morbid, but I think at the moment we're not living on borrowed time, us as a species, the Porsche or the car enthusiast, but we have to accept that things are changing. And I don't want to sit around and waste that time of that transitional period moaning about what they're going to be like. I want to get out there and enjoy it, and we all should. So go and do some racing, go and do an auto test, go and take a trip, go and see a part of the country that you've not seen before. Fix something. Do something to your car that you didn't expect to do. Fit new wiper blades to your car. You wouldn't believe the difference it makes you feel when the first rain shower comes. Fit some new dampers, put some new tyres on it. I want to live. I want to mirror the enthusiasm I had when I was 17, 18 years old. And I think some of us lose that as we get old and boring and earn a bit more money or lose a bit of money and have children. I want to rediscover my passion for the more basic facets of being a car enthusiast, and then hope that it lasts longer than I fear it might.
Well, that's fantastic advice. I will do just that. I will go to the garage later this afternoon and make sure I put some miles on my car this weekend. I wish you many wonderful miles in 2021, and hopefully we'll see you in 2022. Thank you to Collecting Cars for providing PCA this opportunity to sit with Chris Harris and talk all about Porsche, and we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Cheers, guys.